She worked at this store too, and the kids just got into it. And so, a lot of people still know about it. And so, yeah, a lot of them were giving me you guys were about this thing.
All right, buddy.
How bad I am.
Let's go to the kids' room.
Like, I my brain just doesn't compute at this rate of speed. For like that, I'm like trying to put nuggets in boxes and I can't count. I'm like, did I put 12 in there?
Get it? It's like a hot.
Yeah, that's really what I mean. That's
Yeah.
what you're just
Yeah.
you're just cranking them out. I'm not doing
But
it.
it, you can like
Well, that's why dishes are so great because I'm not back up. I'm gonna buy myself in the bag. No one's asking me for anything. I don't feel like I'm wasting any time. Customers aren't waiting on anything. I'm just gonna do my own thing. It was great, but I worked last night for like 10. It's like my favorite environment. A bunch of like high schoolers that are like, I forgot how crazy kitchens are. With high school kids, because it's like a locker room almost. That they think they're back there. Like, I forgot that moment.
These are kids that age.
Yeah. God, I got some skills with those people, but man.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
No, that's where
Yeah. Got offered drugs last night. Yeah.
From a staff member?
Yeah.
Nice.
I feel like Tim used me as a narc now. Oh my gosh.
Man.
It's like,
Did you take them?
No, I thought about it. I think he was talking about. I first thought it was just talk, but I'm pretty sure he might have been thinking about something like pills or something more serious. I could probably
Hey,
go
this
take
is how
some.
we're
there's science still in high school. They get right in there.
I did.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was the charger of it. Yeah, you get the good stuff.
So I'm about to text Tim like, hey man, just so you're aware, I don't want to be the snitch, but I got some big dollar deals with all the people in
Wow.
Yeah, he thought I was like 21, 22.
Why you
Yeah.
It's always a win.
They all think I'm so young out there. But
We're literally like a mile away. So
Yeah.
if you ever need anything.
my God, but
Yeah. I'll send Drew down.
I got asked the other day, a few of the girls were talking about kids and stuff. Like, Corey, when do you want to have kids? I was like, well,
You said 10 years.
Yeah. I'm like, I got kids. I was like, you have kids? Plural? I'm like, yeah, 3 of them. So like, when did you start? 8 years old? I'm like, no. I was like, I'm 33. I'm like, no. Yeah. I'm like, why are you here?
It's the drugs.
It's the drugs.
Heard about the drug culture.
The best drug in town's working in the kitchen.
Oh, this is fun.
I felt like I was so hurt by the guy too, because we were vibing all night. Like, he's from California, so we talked about California, we talked about Oregon, we talked about Washington, the West Coast. We talked about like the housing market and culture and all this crazy stuff, cost of living. We were vibing. And at the end, I was like, hey man, I got some stuff in my car. Once. I'm like,
I would take it as a compliment. You made it in.
yeah, I guess so.
Yeah.
He's gonna really crap himself when he finds out I was a pastor for yeah. Some of me getting off the drugs and chicks like that.
Yeah. I mean, you do kind of put that right now.
Alright. I look at this guy, he's a drug guy.
He wants this for sure.
This guy's gonna say yes. If anyone here is gonna do some drugs, it's gonna be
Well, I mean, you do answer people's, like, anytime someone tells you anything, you're always like, oh my God.
My guy, my dude. What's up?
It kind of gives off that vibe. You might already be on that vibe. Like,
I'll take some.
and you lived in Portland, so they're just like, oh yeah, he for sure.
All the pieces together.
We're for sure about it.
Oh, you were in Portland? You must smoke weed.
That's right.
You must have high right now.
At least smoke weed. Probably others.
When I did have someone ask me that one when I was like, "Have you been to Portland?" And they're like, "Were you like high all the time?" And I'm like,
Yes.
That's your first question you asked me. And also,
We were high on the
people,
spit.
everyone in Portland is just high all the time.
Indeed.
I was like, no.
I think in Portland, it's literally just what we just said.
That's what I'm like.
All the time. East side is basically that.
Yeah, Portland, India is not far off from the east side of the
We were there eating one time and I asked for a Coke and the lady says, we bought all our own cola here, sir. And I was like, was it like Coke? And she's like, yes, it's a cola. It's a house cola. And that'll be fine.
They also
My
make
bad.
their own ketchup, but Portland ketchup is so good.
Is it really?
Disgusting. Don't
It's
listen
so
to her.
good.
It's nasty. Don't listen to
Did you just say Portland ketchup?
It's true.
There is Portland
They
ketchup.
make their own
It's-
tomatoes.
They're made out of tomatoes.
It's tomatoes, but it's spicy.
Is it a
so?
brand?
Yeah, well,
It's
it's
like
like
their it's like their house.
it's like
The restaurants will make it.
everywhere. Like there's just so
Oh.
many people and it's just Portland ketchup.
Which is funny, I live there, I don't like ketchup. So I,
You and Megan can't be.
Just give me Heinz.
I can ketchup on everything.
She just says, "Well, Valley just started dealing with Chick-fil-A."
like fries.
Like stupid.
The fries, the delivery device for the ketchup.
I
know it would be like, you know.
It is the same. I have a picture of him with a spatula.
That's so gross.
I didn't sign up for this.
My mom was like,
I do like
mustard. We're gonna get called on for lunch. I would get lunch meat on the sandwiches to school.
Believe me, that's not a bad parent.
Yeah.
You got lunch and bread.
And she was like, you know what? That's all you'll do. I did grow out of it.
Good job.
I also got yelled at for asking for ice when I wanted ice in my drink.
Oh,
and they
you
said,
can't
"We
do
don't
that.
have ice."
Okay.
Plastic straws.
Ice is bad, right? What is ice? What's wrong with ice? I don't remember what's wrong with ice. Something wrong with ice.
I got called on in Seattle because I threw out a
Yeah.
Oh man.
And I'm not a litterer, and
You
that's
have
not
to
awesome. That is composting.
Yeah.
That's my own version of
It's
that.
true.
It's Seattle.
They will compost.
Benton, and there's a warning.
Yes.
Like a
City
slap
of
on the
Seattle,
wrist.
and I was like, you need to calm down. I was
Yeah.
saying.
I heard Seattle's like really serious about composting. Like,
I mean, it's illegal. You have to legally.
Oh, you have.
Yeah, like they're given like in the city limits, not on the outskirts, but in Seattle proper. Like Brett and Amelia, when they lived in Queen Anne, they had to compost, but when they moved right outside to their new neighborhood, they don't have to compost. They're still heavily encouraged.
What part of Seattle were you guys?
That's such a crazy
Like, I probably asked you a bunch of
It's almost in between Seattle and
Oh,
Tacoma.
okay.
Right in the middle.
That's what was
Really close
like
there.
Ford.
Yeah.
He
Oh,
worked
okay.
downtown, and then I worked on the west side and the east side.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
So,
It was fun.
so
Really got
expensive.
I know when we first
So
lived together.
It's called Mercer Island. It's right in the middle. And like, you easily get to Seattle or Bellevue. It's like perfect. And it's like, okay. And then we get there, I'm like, oh, I think that's where Mercer lives. Like, all of them. And I was like, I'm going to afford that.
Yeah, slightly over. Her older brother lived in Queen Anne, and
That's a nice-
I don't even want to know what their apartment. We stayed with them, and it was an impressive place, right next to the space.
We had a friend that had a I'm like,
I love you so much. Oh, yeah.
I think we gotta be a whole nother level of rich.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
Yeah, they were grow up, yeah, they were renting. I was never, I never wanted to like ask them how much they were renting. So I'm sure it's insane. But he's like, he works for Fortnite or Epic Games now. They're like both designers. He basically submitted, I was like curious what he,
This come out the beginning of the year.
supposedly he submitted a revolutionary idea to Epic Games for Fortnite. He's not allowed, he's not allowed to tell me what it is. So,
My brother
Yes,
works
that's
for
her.
her, and he,
very frustrating.
they threw an idea of the
I'm
flag.
gonna make
pole,
Rocket
and
League
they're
better.
taking it, and he's not allowed.
It's like, forget Fortnite, we gotta get with Rocket
It's like
League.
save my game.
Yeah, because it was a fine game until it got bought by Epic Games, and then they added the item shop.
I haven't played Rocket League since 2018.
Take your lunch break.
It's
Rocket League, Rocket League.
Because every time I play, I'm like, I'm gonna put
I was
my
like,
controller through my
saying,
Sounds about right.
So that's awful. I hate it so much.
What rank were you?
Oh, like silver. I was awful. I was horrible. And all my friends were good at it too. So they're like, hey guys. I think Josh is pretty good. Yes, he's so good at it. And I get on and I'm horrible and I miss them all. And they're like, oh, you suck. And I have to leave the party sometime because so bad.
There's so much negativity in Rocket League. Like, I made a mission to like, my ministry's gonna be. So like, my opponent would like score and be like, nice shot, man.
Hey, great job.
Nice kid. Yeah, nice ball.
puzzle pieces are coming
I was
together in my
like-
mind right now.
Like 3 months ago, pissed. I'm like,
I was
So
not.
what's a good alternative to Rocket League?
No video games whatsoever.
Yeah, there it is. We were knocking on the door the whole time.
Yeah, I'm not doing it.
None.
Now, the 2v2 games with friends
yeah, that's fine.
might be some of the best games of all time. Like when you like those were like the 3 a.m. in the morning from like 20. I guess I did play in 2020. We would stay up till like I was a grown man and stayed till 3, 4 in the morning playing Rocket. This kid named Summit, so I did these random duos in Fortnite one time, and I got paired with this kid named Chippy. He was like, I'm gonna take a stab and say he was probably at the time 11, 12, or 13, somewhere in that range. And so you got me as a 30-year-old playing Fortnite with this kid, and he was the stuff. Well, we play, so me and him, we start playing regularly, 2020 together. We then jump in like, hey, let's jump into a random squad. So me and Chippy jump into a pair of 4. We meet this guy named Sean who lives up in Seattle, and he's a grown man. He's got the deepest voice I've ever heard in my life. And then some chick, I can't remember her name, she was very sporadic. But me, Sean, and Chippy started running the game. Well, when then Chippy got me into Rocket League, we played 2v2, and that kid like was incredible at video games. I'm pretty sure he never went to school.
Just played all the
He
time.
might be if there's like a professional that comes out in the next few years.
Probably.
His name's Chippy. I'm gonna call him up.
There's a 13-year-old SSL. Like top 1,000.
Is his name Chippy?
I'm
gonna
Yeah,
call
look
him
him
up.
up.
But he would get so heated in Rocket League. Because I was trash, but I would just back him up, and so like he'd be like yelling, and like cussing other people out, like, "Yeah, man, yeah, you're trash, bro." Chippy's like, "I'm about to." Chippy was like, he would call his move out as he was about to do it. Like that. He was really good. And he was, I don't know, make myself look like an idiot because I don't know the terminology, but he would like
It's gonna be great.
hit the turbos and like burst and like corkscrew spin.
Oh,
I'm done. Air roll. I need to meet you. Yeah.
Air
Chippy
roll.
was the man. I called him yes sir.
Yes, sir.
Anytime he told me to do
11-year-old.
something. Because my name was Sir Freshie, so he'd call me Freshie. He'd be like, Freshie and Chippy, here we
So
go.
fresh.
Dynamic duo.
That's how his voice sounded. I was so fresh, sometimes before he would, he was like in around himself, he would wear his headset, I would hear it. And I'm like, what are you doing? And who are you playing with? Like, it's this,
Especially Fortnite. He'd be like, Freshie, I need help. Freshie.
like, what is that?
When your husband goes deep on video games, and you've been married a while,
It's just like, I don't know. Yeah, I'm like,
What is happening?
I regret
Especially
this.
lately. There was a few weeks ago, we were all playing, and she kind of comes in, and she just like pokes her head in the stairs. And I'm like, and I forgot that I had the volume up on the TV too. And it was through the TV, but also through my headset. And so through the TV.
I was like, what is happening here?
And well, she just comes in, she stares at me. I was like, I kept looking over at her, and I was like, what is she doing? And I just kept playing. And finally, I was like, I take my ear off to see what she needed, and I could hear everything going through the TV. I was like, ah.
I get it.
We're taking video games away.
Yeah, it's like, you know what, you're turning it
You're not allowed to play with these toys in here.
All right, everybody. Let's
We need the Lord.
let's get going.
off.
Need the Lord. Lord with a T. The Lord. We're gonna start a little differently today. I want to just play some music in the background, and I'm going to read a different translation of Psalm 23, and it's been really helpful for me lately. And yeah, I'm just going to read it. My hope is that you can just sit and like ease into the space today, ease into the table. And if a phrase or a word comes up during this that just like resonates with you, just grab it. And if it's helpful for you, just grab it and then forget everything else. Just daze out for a while. So just zoom in on whatever word that you feel like the Lord gives you. But I'm going to read this, and I'm going to play another song for us and just help us enter in, and then we'll name the good together. So you can take a posture of prayer or close your eyes or whatever you want to do. And I'm going to read this over us, and then I'll play a song. This is a translation of Psalm 23. The ground of our being and giver of our existence is my caretaker and guide. So I already have everything I need at the deepest level. This giver makes me lie down in lush places, leads me beside peaceful waters, and restores my soul. I find that God, the source of all that is true and good and beautiful, takes an interest in me, guiding me along a path of truth and goodness and beauty for the sake of love. Even though I walk through a valley where death and loss haunt me, where the threats are existential, I'm learning to trust that which is greater than evil, because evil is a limited resource and God never runs out of love. For God is with me and for me, gently nudging me toward my identity and purpose, fiercely fending off that which would destroy my soul. The giver is so generous that I find myself feasting on good things, even when the threat of evil or suffering is close at hand. An abundance overtakes me. While suffering may be close at hand, pursuing me or pursuing us, such evil is outpaced by the goodness and the mercy that shall chase us in every moment. Our eternal home is with God, right here, right now, which is the place of greatest belonging that we'll ever know. God, we want to enter in with the stuff, with the sin or the questions or the baggage or the heartache or the loss. God, we want to enter in and sit at the table with you. I want to embody this that we just read. I pray that myself and these friends here, we'd embody this. Whatever it is that's surrounding us or pursuing us, whatever, we sit at the table where you're preparing a feast for us. God, we're here and we're yours. Let me pray these things in your name. Amen. We'll play a song for us real quick, and then we'll name the good.
Here is where I lay it down, every burden, every crown. This is my surrender. This is my surrender. Here is where I lay it down, every lie and every doubt. This is my surrender. I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. Here is where I lay it down, every burden, every crown. This is my surrender. This is my surrender. Here is where I lay it down, every lie and every doubt. This is my surrender. Oh, and I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. And I will make room for you to do whatever you want. Shake up the ground of all my tradition, break down the walls of all my religion. You're always better. You're always better. Shake up the ground of all my tradition, break down the walls of all my religion. You're always better. You're always better. Shake up the ground of all my tradition, break down the walls of all my religion. You're always better. You're always better. Now make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. I'll make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. Here's where I lay it down. You are all I'm chasing now. This is my surrender.
I love that song. Emily sent me a Spotify playlist of some songs a while ago, and I visit it often. But the song I always come back to is this one for some reason, so it always speaks to me. So, before we keep going, we can name the good, the true, the beautiful that you've encountered or seen or tasted or attempting to see. I think is a good way to also say sometimes that which I'm trying to perceive and chase down. Name that as well. So what can we name together? That's right.
Well, unless something blows up, he'll have his first off day next Sunday.
Nice.
Which will be fantastic. But it's been really good. We were both really nervous about August because it was a new environment, and when we first started, he was like, "Oh my gosh, this is absolute chaos. What have I done? Why am I doing this?" But just in the past week, he's like, I feel like I'm settling and getting into a really good groove, and actually feel like we're making, albeit slow, we're making progress. And at the beginning, he was like, "This is hopeless. Why am I doing this?" And so it's just been good to see him get to that point, and us have made it. How many days in August? 3-4 more days? I'm like,
Yeah, that's cool. Anything else?
We're in, everyone knows we're just in a test season, and last week I was like super discouraged, which I feel like Corey and I take turns with that, which is the annoying part, because I want to just sometimes jump into the sea of the darkness and just be like, this is awful, and I'm just gonna let the awfulness sweep over and just accept the fate of awful. And Corey's like, wow.
Perfect time.
And so But like this whole since June and all this stuff's been happening, I feel like Corey and I like always take turns on like who's feeling discouraged. Like we've never been discouraged at the same time. Like if I'm really discouraged, he's incredibly hopeful, and if he's really discouraged, I somehow am incredibly hopeful. Which is just like I say, it's annoying because I'm just like, man, like even in all this, I like God is still like helping, and I get annoyed by that because I'm just like, no, like either do what I want or nothing at all. Like we're either having it all fixed or we're just wallowing in self pity. Nothing in between. But all of that to say that it is like this week has been hard, and I've been really discouraged. Corey's been really hopeful, and no matter what, like we just keep. I mean, nothing is really changing so far, but somehow one of us still is holding hope at all times, and it's just like it feels very much like the Israelites wandering through the wilderness, that there's always the fire by night and the cloud by day, and like sometimes it's all we have, but we're still headed somewhere, and there's still something leading us. But it's definitely a wilderness, and just feeling very aware of that, but also very aware that like in the middle of it, there's provision over and over, and it's just it's annoying. Like I get annoyed by it. Like I want to be thankful, so it's your thing of like I want to see that it's good, but I'm just like annoyed.
Sure.
I'm like, okay, God, forget the manna. We know that you can do other things, so like where's that? Like where's the real miracles? I don't want this like B team miracle. I'm down with the JV miracles. I would like varsity, please. So just waiting for God to pull out his big guns, because man, it's feeling real bland. That's where I am.
That's good.
It's good and bad all at the same time.
Sure.
We can hold both.
There you go.
I've had a good week.
Corey's holding hope this week.
Well, I can't wait for next week.
We'll see how next week goes. I just have like an Elijah moment on like Monday. You know where Elijah's like complaining to God that he's the only one. He's like, I'm the only one doing this. Like, where are my people? Like, God, you told me to do this, and I'm doing this now. Now I'm depressed. I'm anxious. And then God's like, bro, chill out. Like, you're fine.
Take a nap.
Is that where God's like, here's some food
Yeah,
and
here's some food. Take a
sleep?
And I laughed this morning with Emily because I was talking about like, I was like, gosh, I'm just so tired. And I was like, it's probably because I'm not eating 3 meals a day. I'm really only eating 2. And I'm like, how privileged is that? Like, man, I'm really only eating like a bar for breakfast, and then I get like a free meal at Chick-fil-A, and then I had dinner with my family at night. I'm just like, it's like,
It's roughing it.
it's just like, I'm at Judah's baseball game one Monday night, and I'm over here like having a good time, getting to see my family, and I'm over here mad that I'm like working a job. Like, it's just like, I said, I'm on like, it could be way, way worse. Like, where it could be way bad, but at the same time, and all even the parts of, your job. I'm sorry, I'm gonna get to the point here. That every single aspect of your job you don't enjoy. Like, there's parts of your job and life that just like, hey, like no one really enjoys sending emails. Like, don't lie to me.
I'm sure someone at this table does. Where are they at? Please raise your hand.
You're scared too.
She doesn't like to read them. But she
Yeah.
likes to
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like there's just certain things at your job you sit down or at school and you're like, man, I just don't want to do this, but you still do it because it's part of it. And it's like, it's not just about jobs. So there's parts of life that's like that too. Like, there's situations in your life where you're like, I really just don't like this right now. But it's building to something. And it's all work in it. The parts that you don't like end up kind of becoming the thing that makes all the other parts better too. And so yeah, I'm over here washing dishes for 10 hours a day at Chick-fil-A. Also awesome at the same time though, because I'm like getting to check out in my brain and listen to podcasts and listen to music, and I'm not a good Chick-fil-A employee whatsoever. Like, I'm not. There's nothing There's nothing about my speed of hands to nugget into box ratio that's better than anyone there.
It's prime time.
Like, the worst feeling is like me trying my best to wrap these dumb burritos, and they look like trash. Like, they look like trash. And I know they look like trash, and everyone's being real kind about it because they know it looks like trash. And then here comes this 15-year-old girl, homeschooler, that walks in there working a 2-hour shift and wraps the most beautiful burrito I've ever seen in my entire life. You should have taken a picture with it. And it's
I get those burritos all the
flawless.
time. They're perfect.
And she makes like 4 burritos in a span that makes me take 1. And it's just that moment where you're like, I'm just not a good employee. I belong at the dish. I swear that's my breath. But I say all that to say that there's even in these moments of just kind of the mundane and stuff I'm just not really wanting to do. It's still been good just because it's all, I'm trusting it's all building towards something. And that even I'll be 75 and telling stories about working at Chick-fil-A, and I think that it's I'm not trying to get so focused on the circumstances of right now that I'm missing kind of what's going on around me. And I think that's why I appreciated doing dishes this week, because it allowed me to kind of stop and look around, and that, man, I'm at home at night, I'm missing some things, but not everything. And, we're doing okay. So that's the overall summary of my week. We'll see how next week is, but.
Roll forward. I love that we just told the same story, but very different perspectives.
Yeah.
Marriage.
Yeah.
So if you come to Chick-fil-A next week and your burrito's trash, I'm sorry.
Ask the 15-year-old home.
Yeah, where's that 15-year-old girl at?
Is this just Corey on? Who's making sandwiches? Yeah, I'll do the nuggets.
Anything else?
Yeah, I mean, just quickly, if you had talked to us a week ago, like, we were convinced we were about to move to Buffalo, New York, and like completely uproot our lives
Nice.
and do crazy stuff.
Nice.
We have something to talk about.
Buffalo.
But it was so an interesting opportunity came up for me, and like, it was one of those, like, it was interesting enough where we had to like take stock in our lives and be like, okay, like, let's do an honest, like, pros and cons kind of thing. And it was like a giant slap of humility in the face, because like God's been so good to us, and like similar to what you were saying, like, we have a great community, and I'm focusing on like the minor annoyances I have with our community instead of being like, oh my gosh, we have, we would have to really screw up to like be out there alone. Like, we have so many people that love us, and it was just a good time to like really reflect on where we're at, and basically be like, okay, Gage, like, you're blessed to be a blessing. Get over yourself. Like, I love you tremendously, but like, you've gotta understand, like, I don't know. I'm so cynical, like, all the time. It's like the biggest issue I have, and like a lot of the reason why we're here, to be honest, is because of my cynicism and like the struggles we've had with our church plant and stuff. And but
I think you're in good company.
Welcome to the
Now, if you don't like to send emails and are cynical, raise your hand.
God is like meeting me in this space with a lot of like patience and grace and vengeance, and like the patience He's showing me, it like makes no sense, and it's just been really cool to see that. But just very thankful. And so it was tough at first because it was a bit embarrassing to like really honestly reflect on it, and like, but it was a good injection of humility, and I'm trying to lean more towards gratitude this week. So.
That's good. Yeah. That's good.
Mine is like, I don't know, kind of a looking back and looking forward. Just in the way that God is working in my relationships with my parents. There's a lot of like deeply rooted responses just based on the environment that I grew up in. And this is the first time that I feel like I've been able to grow past those and actually vulnerable interactions with them. Had a really good one with my dad, and I'm hopeful that another one is coming with my mom.
week. So.
That's good. Thanks for sharing. Anything else? All right, y'all ready? Sermon on the Mount Part 2, Beatitude Part 2. If you want to follow along, we're going to read again Matthew 4 at the end and then into Matthew 5. We'll do that in just a second, but if you want to turn there, feel free to. So today we're doing the second Beatitude. Blessed are those who mourn, happy stuff, cheery stuff. But today, subtitle is Jesus, the philosopher, the psychologist, the physicist, and I couldn't have an extra P, but the therapist. So I hope you understand why here in a little bit. But a question to begin. Have you ever lost something and didn't know it? What I mean by that is you've been cleaning out a closet, or Taylor, I was about to say myself, but mostly Taylor, cleaned out one of our extra rooms. We discover items that you haven't thought about in months or years. It's like, oh, yeah, you lost it, but you had no idea you lost it, or you just haven't used it. Most of the stuff in our spare bedroom was stuff we have not touched or thought about in a long time. So it's like you have those things and you just kind of find it and you say, oh, and you do something with it, versus like you lose something that you use or you wear daily and you go on the hunt for it. And again, usually this happens in my life and I just ask Taylor and she knows exactly where it's at. I'm like, hey, have you seen this? And she's like, yeah, it's 3 shirts down in your left, the left-hand drawer. And I'm like, oh, okay. She knows exactly where it's at. So yeah, it's like you relentlessly hunt for something, okay? Because there's something special about that thing. I want you to hold on to that because I think there's something in that discovery. As a reminder, we're doing the Sermon on the Mount because, to quote Dallas Willard, of course, he says the idea of having faith in Jesus has come to be totally isolated from being his apprentice, his student, and learning how to do what he said. The idea of having faith in Jesus has become totally isolated from being his student and learning how to do what he said. It's really interesting. To be a follower of Jesus, to be a Christian nowadays, has a whole lot more to do just with your brain rather than who you're becoming and who you are in the world. Again, Willard says this: the greatest issue facing the world today, with all of its heartbreaking needs, is whether those who, by profession or culture, are identified as Christians will become disciples, students, apprentices, practitioners of Jesus Christ, steadily learning from Jesus how to live the life of the kingdom of the heavens into every corner of existence. It's like that's the greatest issue, is if Christians will actually become students of Jesus. That's what we're studying in Sermon on the Mount. So just to hit the scripture one more time real quick, and then we'll start in chapter 4, verse 23, and then we'll read down to our beatitude. Okay, so if you want to look at it, Matthew 4, look at verse 23. Jesus went throughout all Galilee, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and every affliction among the people. So his fame spread throughout all Syria, and they brought him all the sick, those who were afflicted with various diseases and pains, those oppressed by demons, epileptics, and paralytics, and he healed them. Great crowds followed him from Galilee and the Decapolis, and from Jerusalem and Judea, and from beyond the Jordan. Seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him. He opened up his mouth and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." So just a reminder, the message of the kingdom is that a radical new life is available to you. God wants to live God's life in you and through you, and has made it presently available to you. Like the most base level, I think that's what the Sermon on the Mount is holding out for us. It's a way to be caught up into the life of God, the life that God wants for us. It's what it looks like to live in the reality of God, living out the life of God. It's gift. We have to start with gift. As you step into the Sermon on the Mount, you're putting into practice. We're learning from Jesus as we go. I think we move more fully into experiencing the life of God in us, through us. And remember, blessed, we talked about this last week, just to remind us, blessed, kind of channeling the two meanings. There's the Greek meaning, makarios. It's kind of channeling like the suffering-free life of the gods, this blissful existence that the gods exhibited. That's one way. They're free from earthly cares and struggles. That's the Greek meaning. At the same time, the Jews had this massive concept of blessedness. They imagined a kind of what it for them is. I talked about this last week. They had this prayer called the Ashrei. It's a Jewish prayer that they recite about 3 times a day. It's composed of a bunch of psalms that they smash together. The beginning psalms say, "Happy are those, blessed are those who dwell in God's house, God's temple." Another one, it says, "Blessed are the people whose God is the Lord." So the Jews have this idea of blessedness. It means you're enveloped in God, like the life of God is there. There's this beautiful existence, lacking suffering. You have everything that you need, living the life of God. As you step into the teachings of Jesus, the Beatitudes, this blessedness, he says, "Blessed." They're conjuring up all these images of the good life. And Jesus is slowly just flipping them on its head. If blessedness describes that kind of life, the Greek and the Jewish kind of ideal of that life, then the rest of what Jesus says flips it upside down, may even sound like naive or just like, what the heck is he talking about? He tells the crowd that he's describing that kind of life. And then he goes on describing the kind of people who are going through the absolute worst. And this week he's talking about those who mourn. There's lots of stuff around those who mourn. If you Google it or you look at some commentaries, most of the people talk about Jesus is probably talking about those who mourn over their sin. It's usually what commentators hit with, which is really interesting because there's not a lot surrounding that there. That's a lot of reading into the text, and but it's option. You mourn over your sin, then God's going to comfort you because you recognize your need and all that stuff. But just take the words at their base meaning. Jesus says there's a blessedness when you mourn. If you suggest to someone who's in the midst of mourning that they're actually blessed, it feels like it's not giving the most gracious response. So we said this last week. Jesus is not just giving some kind of quippy one-liners that we try to contort ourselves into. Like, Jesus is not saying you should go mourn. He's saying something a little bit more paradoxical. There's something in the middle of mourning that Jesus names comfort. He's not saying go and find mourning, go and mourn. He's saying there's something in the middle of your mourning that he calls comfort. Jesus is saying paradoxically that when you go through something difficult, whether it's personal or global or whatever, it's a loss. Like when you mourn, it's a loss of something. And I think Jesus is saying when you turn toward the loss, there's a comfort there. And I hope that we can expand that. So think about it for yourself. Try to get personal for yourself. Maybe you had a dream that slowly dissipated, fell apart. You left with a hole in your heart from it. Maybe it's someone you lost in your life. Maybe it's a loss of relationship. Maybe it's a loss of faith. Talk about that a lot here. A lot of us have grown up with a certain picture of God and Christianity in the Bible. And sometimes when you lose it, like when we talk about deconstruction and losing your faith and changing your perspectives, we need to talk more about like grief and trauma because like it's an identity for us. And you lose some things, you lose a lot of things. A lot of times the loss of faith can happen when we suffer. And sometimes the loss of faith can actually be the thing that you suffer. So that's like option on the table. Loss of health or a job or financial stability or miscarriage or a death of a dream or physical trauma or even something subtle, I think, as like you moved or you started a new school or a new job. Like there's subtle losses that we go through in our life. There's some stability that we have that we lose often. I think it's a very broad category. But the issue is too often to our educated and rational minds, our skeptical age where we celebrate everything that's chemical and rational, we kind of resist the losing and the weakness and the vulnerability. The modern consciousness, I think, resists grief. Our response to loss, whenever we do have loss, is a strategy to avoid it or try to fix it. Or like we feel self-indulgent or it's like unproductive, so I'm not going to spend time on it or whatever. Maybe you're not trusting God enough. Maybe you're dwelling on the issues too much. You're not being positive. These are the things that go through my head. The truth is that the loss confronts us often with an unsettling powerlessness, and we try to do something with it. We try to fix it. And that mode of mourning, lamenting, turning towards it is very, very different than, I would say, a celebrated mode of fixing. Our culture celebrates fixing, even in Christianity, we celebrate fixing things. We train people with a dualistic mind, which goes back and forth seeking justification, seeking the right reason to hate or reject another person, blame something, blame someone. Like you got to have a reason for something. And we never find home base, or to quote the Beatitude, I don't think we ever find comfort there. The easy right and wrong, black and white, strict answers don't work when you mourn. It doesn't work when you lose something. Our natural instinct there is to fix, or even to try to understand it. Like, why is this happening, and what's all this stuff going on? I think that's the ego speaking. The ego insists on understanding that. I think that's why Jesus often praises people's faith, because faith is the ability to stand in a liminal space in the middle, stand on a threshold, to hold two things at once, contraries, until we're moved, enough to move to a deeper level and have a bigger picture of the world. And I think the same is true of mourning a loss. When we go to the place of lament and mourning, it's an inner posture where we're accepting, I can't fix it, I can't explain it, I can't control it, I can't understand it, I can just turn towards it. When we mourn, we're in a state of free fall of sorts. Our heart is reaching out toward what we believe is seemingly lost, but cannot help loving anyway. Ken Wilber, he says this: practice the wound of love. Real love hurts. Real love makes you totally vulnerable and open. Real love will take you far beyond yourself, and therefore real love will devastate you. I think that's what we're dealing with. So the point is that when we mourn, it's usually there's a loss of something. Mourning is a different mode of being, and there seems to be some blessing that Jesus is talking about that he wants us to step into when you lose something. And we must start, I think, with being the kind of people who can surrender that mode of fixing, explaining, avoiding, controlling, or trying to understand. Does that make sense? I think we have to start there. Now, the next phrase, for they will be comforted. To talk about that real quick, make a couple of notes. You guys know in scriptures, massive book of the Psalms have been described as the sacred cries of the communal heart. I think it's a beautiful way of describing it. In the Psalms, a bunch of these songs, these prayers, you can loosely, generally describe them in three ways. There's Psalms of praise, thanksgiving, and lament. And you can guess which one's the biggest? Lament. Lots of crying out. Feels very complex. Why would the sacred text have so much crying out and complex feelings? Just honestly look at it, because it's like a complex text is best for a complex life. So it's like my mourning is not easily simplified. So it's like the Psalms are these beautiful places where they understand our hearts. These writers are crying out for deliverance. They beg for justice. They lament injustice. They voice their questions and their doubts of God. Over and over again, they name the voids that's created in their life. One writer said the Psalms wrap nouns and verbs around our pain more than any other book. I thought that was really beautiful. Eugene Peterson says, poets tell us what our eyes, blurred with too much gawking, and our ears, dulled with too much chatter, miss around and within us. Poets use words to drag us to the depth of reality itself. Poetry grabs us by the jugular. Far from being a cosmetic language, it's intestinal. And the Psalms train us in honest prayer. That was wonderful. These lament prayers, just a sample of few, often go like this. This is Psalm 13. How long, O Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts day after day and have sorrow in my heart? Psalm 25 says, turn to me and be gracious to me, for I'm lonely and afflicted. Relieve the troubles of my heart. Free me from my anguish. Psalm 31, be merciful to me, Lord. I'm in distress. My eyes grow weak with sorrow, my soul and body with grief. My life is consumed by anguish, my years by groaning. My strength fails because of the affliction, my bones grow weak. Psalm 12, help, Lord, for no one is faithful anymore. Those who are loyal have vanished from the human race. Last one, Psalm 74 says, why have you rejected us? We are given no signs from God. No prophets are left, and none of us knows how long this will be. Hardcore. Have you ever prayed or felt those things? Especially that last one. I have no idea how long this is going to be. Honest. Our culture, and I think by extension, even our church, the American church, is not comfortable with the raw and naked lament. If you are lamenting, we're called out because you're not trusting God, or you're not being positive, or whatever. Often the prayers that are least welcome in our spiritual spaces are the most prevalent in the Bible. Like, that's what's really interesting. And if we do talk about lament or mourning, we have to tag it with something at the end, like a praise, to make sure people come back next week. It's like we're not just going to talk about our issues all the time. But what's interesting is if you study the Psalms, even the ones I just showed you, these Psalms often do turn to praise and something positive at the end. So Psalm 13, like I just read, it ends with, "But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation." 25, "The Lord confides in those who fear him. He makes his covenant known to them. My eyes are ever on the Lord, and he will release my feet from the snare." Psalm 31, "Praise be to the Lord, for he showed me the wonders of his love when I was in a city under siege." Psalm 12, "You, Lord, will keep the needy safe and will protect us forever from the wicked." Psalm 74, the last one, "But God is my king from long ago. He brings salvation on the earth. It was you who split open the sea by your power." They list a bunch of these acts of God after that. So the fact that these prayers often turn to praise or something positive at the end feels sometimes very, very inauthentic, at least in my eyes. A lot of times, like, you struggle with something, you go through a hard time, and people try to give you something. They try to give you like some Christianese to make you feel better, and it never works. It's like fake spirituality. Someone trying to help you and end up saying something that's completely unhelpful. You know what I mean? And this is something that Jason Miller talks about in that book. I thought was really helpful. He says something to remember is that these texts, they often express in microcosm things that are bigger and take longer than suggested on the page. So just because it takes them 4 verses to get there doesn't mean you will. It's not meant to diminish the pain, but to lead us through it, I would say, for these prayers, these psalms. What I mean by this is that these writers who gave us these ancient meditations on lament also gave us ancient meditations on the glory in the world that we inhabit. Okay, if you read the Psalms, it's everywhere. They had a baptized imagination. Like God was in everything and everything was in God. They had an enchanted faith. And it's hard to get back to that world in our overly rational and skeptical secular age if you lean in. By enchanted faith, I think the Jews had a way of seeing where there's more going on than just simply matter and cells and chemicals lurking around us. So everything is like charged with meaning. That's why the Psalms often talk about the hills and the cattle and all this stuff. This is why I think they end up saying things about praise and glory in the end of these. I might have talked about this before, but just indulge me for a second. In the early 1900s, there was a philosopher and a psychologist named William James. Delivered a series of lectures in Scotland. Those lectures were eventually published in a book titled The Varieties of the Religious Experience. In it, he talks about what a religious experience is. And he says a religious experience is a sense of reality, a feeling of an objective presence, a perception of what we might call something there, more deep and more general than what our regular senses may have revealed to us. I think that's really helpful because too often I think that sensing truth and goodness and beauty and God is things that are bigger and more miraculous than what they actually are sometimes. Being overly evangelical and calling everything a gift from God, it's like it feels fake sometimes, but it's like we can easily name some of these external overt stuff like angels and visions and miracles. And it's like perhaps there's also more of a subtle speaking of God, a subtle presence of God. I think the Jews are in on. I think if we take William James's definition of religious experiences, which is saying that they can be baseline defined as perceptions of more. There's more going on. Encountering a reality more than real. More than enchanted, more related, more alive, more loving, more sacred, more holy, more beautiful, true, and good. I think a lot of us have more of those experiences than we maybe can take account of, We have these overt things like this is God and this is God and this is how God can show up. But what if like we opened up the floodgate a little bit? It's like God actually may show up in a whole lot more. There's actually a whole lot more going on maybe. It's easy to write that off as superstitious or these writers as ignorant or backwards or primitive or whatever. But I think the truth is if we just take inventory for ourselves, it's like I think we've all felt more. We've all felt these things more. You hold your kid for the first time in some way and it's like, okay, this is something happening here. The world and the people in it are richer and more wondrous than just chemicals and cells. I tried to talk about that last week too. So when we widen our view and we don't reduce God and glory and beauty and truth and goodness to big and sexy things like visions and voices and spectacles, I think we may discover that we bump into God a whole lot more. You bump into glory a whole lot more. I think the Jews were onto this. And maybe Jesus was tapping into the same philosophy, the same psychology there. Richard Beck, he says this, our faith will struggle when it becomes excessively verbal and rational. In my experience, Christians who struggle with disenchantment lean too heavily on words, too many books and too many podcasts, too much talking. Disenchantment is often a sign that you've lost touch with the aesthetic, the ineffable aspects of faith. If you're struggling with disenchantment, odds are you're thinking rather than paying attention. One thing worth paying attention is in Psalm 42, the author uses a phrase, deep calls to deep. You guys probably heard that before. I've always used that in a positive sense. Like the deep in me is calling out the deep in something else, or the deep in that is calling out to the deep in me. There's something resonates. I talked about bass notes a couple of weeks ago. I feel like that's a bass notes thing. We sense good, true, beautiful in something, and it speaks to me. The deep in that is speaking to the deep in me. But I also think it's the opposite way too, is like the poet's way of describing our capacity to sense the glory around us. Deep calls to deep. Deep calls to deep. If you zoom in on that word glory, just entertain me for a second. It's so interesting. It's the Hebrew word kavod. Usually we mean praise and worship, glorifying God or give glory to God, you know. But I think if you go further back, it actually opens up a whole lot more. That's a lot more helpful. If you go further back, the root meaning of kavod is weight. Okay. So as trade developed during the ancient times, merchants developed a need to assess the value of goods like crops and clothing and gold and all that stuff in order to barter. Well, the early devices used a simple yet effective system which relied on balancing goods. Okay. Consisted of two plates attached to an overhead beam, which is fixed on a central pole. Measurements were taken by placing the measured object on one plate and weight stones on the other till an equilibrium was reached. Everybody has the picture in their head, you know. Eventually, stone weights were replaced with more accurate metal weights, and a system of measurement was imposed to eliminate dishonest weighing practices because traders would carry around inaccurate weights to line their pockets a little bit more. So there's a standardization system later on. But here's the point. To determine something's value, to see if it was real or not, they would see if it had weight. Okay? They knew the weight of something. By the weight of something, that's how they knew if it was real. It was a precious metal, it had proper weight, it had glory. It was deemed real. Okay? I want you to hold that image. We'll talk about it later in Sermon on the Mount too, but there's that. To have glory means to be real. It means to glorify, means to reflect something weighty, to reflect something real. It's with a gravity. When we suffer loss, I think what we are saying is that there was a glory in that thing, and you feel it. Deep calls to deep. We're affirming the goodness, the truth, the beauty, the real in that thing, in that person, in that dream, and that's what makes it so damn hard. You know, it's not just you just lost something. I think your soul is connecting to it because there's a gravitas there. Are you with me? I think even though our world is decreasingly enchanted, we're not as superstitious and thinking everything is enchanted anymore. We're increasingly rational. I think we still have this glory radar in us. Deep calls to deep. It's what gives grief its strange power, I think. The deep is calling to deep, and as it breaks, you lose it, it breaks you, and you mourn. And I think, put that in asterisk because I think that maybe that is a comfort of sorts. That you name the weightiness and the reality that was that life, that dream, that hope, that belief, that thing. You're not saying in retrospect, oh, that was a good thing and whatever. Like you're grieving in real time because you feel it. You're wholeheartedly affirming the glory that was there. I think there's something beautiful there. You're affirming the beauty there. Because of this, I think our souls kind of teach us that glory is there. That glory is universal and everything and everyone. God is within all things and all things is within God. A wholeness that can actually not be fractured by loss. This leads me to ask the other question, was Jesus also a physicist? Didn't see that coming. Throughout human history, scientists have come to understand something called the law of conservation of energy. It states that energy can neither be created or destroyed, only converted from one form of energy to another. The total energy in a system cannot be destroyed. It simply changes forms. Okay. If you study the Christian mystics have been telling us this for centuries. They've been on it. I think Jesus was on it too. They're saying is that glory weight cannot be diminished or destroyed or truly lost. Like it actually can't be lost. It's just converted. It changes forms. It returns to its source, and the source keeps giving that glory back to existence. I think if we can learn to live from that wholeness, I think we can maybe find healing in the times of loss and mourning. Perhaps it's just transitions. And I think it's knocking at the similar door whenever Jesus is resurrected and the disciples experience Jesus. He's like Jesus. He looks like Jesus, talks like Jesus. He's teaching, he's eating fish with them on the beach, but he's also like disappearing and walking through walls. And it's like, okay, what's going on? He's Jesus. He's the same, but he's different. I mean, this is why Jesus tells his disciples that it's better for him to go away. Because what's better than the singular Jesus in one place and time? The spirit of Jesus, perhaps in millions of people across the globe. You know, it's like there's a transition that's good. And I'm saying that very loosely because I'm saying it's hard. I'm saying it's hard. That's all I'm trying to say. There's something going on there. Something going on there. If you study grief, and I've been trying to study grief this week, or just mourning in general, there's something that psychologists or therapists call mourning rituals, grief rituals. It's a way where you try to remember and honor the loss you've been through, maybe engage in some self-transformation or process of letting go. It's like a formal move, a practice you do, maybe informal, a religious service or a practice or a funeral or a written letter or whatever, a monument of sorts. And research shows that mourning rituals actually help people a whole lot. They help you adjust to the loss. They help you develop an ongoing connection to meaning, maybe even gain a semblance of control-ish, maybe find some comfort. That's what it talks about. And I would posit that these rituals help turn us toward the glory that was within the thing that you lost. And I think this is very close to the Jewish ideal of mourning. They'd build altars too. It's a very image of building an altar. They built an altar whenever someone encountered divinity, when they encountered God. They encountered glory, weight, truth, goodness, beauty, and had a profound impact on them. They built an altar to it. And so I remember this, reflect this. There's a physical act of practicing remembering to honor the deep within something and to turn yourself back towards it. You can't fix grief. Grief is not linear. It doesn't start and have a middle and have an end. It just kind of rears its head sometimes. You can't just stop mourning. That's not to say that like you can't do things to help, because that's what I'm trying to talk about. But there's a posture of like, I need to fix this and have someone say something that's going to fix it. You know, we have to avoid. But I think Jesus is simply saying that he's asking us to turn towards it. Turn towards your mourning, turn towards your loss, and turn towards your grief. Because the law of conservation of energy, like, yeah, it's not truly lost. Actually, the glory can't lose that. So I think Jesus was a wonderful therapist and physicist. I think the only thing we may be able to do during mourning is to do something physical. A grief ritual, build an altar, commemorate the deep, calling from you to the deep that was in that thing that was lost. If we trust our Rabbi Jesus, which I'm trying, I think there's some kind of comfort there. That's all I feel like we can quantify that or qualify that. It may not fix it, it won't bring it back, but it will commemorate it. And maybe that's a comfort that Jesus is talking about. Not just personal loss, it could be collective loss. Like we go through big tragedies in our country or shootings, all these things. Like there's a reason that people commemorate together and they walk through these losses together, and we speak the names of victims and we do these candle lightings and stuff like that. It's all very intentional, purposeful stuff. In Jewish history, they have this like deep ritualization of mourning. It's like a whole year process. It's really crazy if you want to study it. But they have the initial mourning, and then they grieve for about a week. The first 3 days are very intense grieving. Then they grieve for a week, and they observe after the first year. They have this beautiful ceremony after the first year of the loss, where they light candles and they pray these prayers. They build a monument, a pillar. Anyways, they commemorate the yearly anniversary with the loss of specific prayers, lighting candles, beautiful. But they also do this thing where they read and they recite prayers together in a group. It's very intentional. We're going to say these things together in a group to ensure that mourners do not grieve in isolation, but they're rather surrounded by members of their community. It's like woven into their tradition that we grieve together. You will not grieve this alone. I think we must turn towards our loss and our mourning and not away from it, and we must turn toward it together. If we don't mourn, I think what we're doing is we're ignoring that glory radar. Actually, it's like we're pausing it. We're saying I'm not going to let my soul attach to the glory that was within. I think what we need to do is affirm that which was lost wasn't expendable. Like, it wasn't like, okay. Like, I affirm that this was not okay. Like, there was glory there and beauty there and truth there. When we mourn, we are given a strange access to glory underneath and within everything that can never be fragmented. I think that's beautiful. So what? I think Jesus is giving us something. It's a comfort there. That may be this, that in naming the very real things that we've lost, I think we're given access to the experience of undiminished wholeness and glory that we're actually always swimming in. When you lose something, you just see it better. I think Jesus knows that. In lament, we turn toward the deep, and it makes us more likely that we'll revel in the deep around us again. The more you see it, it's developing that muscle memory. As we intentionally turn towards it, not running from it, not explaining it, not trying to understand it, maybe commemorate it with a pillar or monument or something physical like that. It actually fortifies the glory radar, that seeing capacity. It helps and enhances the enchantment of life there. The physical and chosen and intentional acts give witness to the loss, simultaneously heighten our perception of the glory everywhere else. Maybe that's a comfort. So perhaps a wise way to work through the losses is to ritualize it. So say the prayers, commemorate it, write the letter, do the therapy, name it, do the motions, and I think your soul will follow. And I think comfort's available to us there. That's all I got. Blessed are those who mourn, they shall be comforted. And that, I think there's a paradox there for us to enter into. What we're going to do is I'm going to end with a quote, and I think my speaker turned off. Taylor, could you hit that speaker again? I'm going to play a song for us after this quote, and just to end us, and then some announcements. But let me read this. This is from the United Church of Christ minister, Otis Moss III. He says this, then I'll play a song for us to end us. He says, what we forget faith-wise in our fear is that even in the darkest night, when we see no light at all, the light is still there. The sun is still shining over earth, even when our side of earth rotates away from it. The stars still shine above us, no matter how thick the clouds above our heads. What we need in the darkest night is to keep walking along the path until we begin to glimpse the stars again. Let me play the song for us, and we'll be done.
The wood and the fire keep me warm. The needle and the compass point home. The beauty of the sea from the shore. Jesus, you are my peace in the storm. Hands that held me close when I was born. The chirping of the birds in the early morn. The evenings in the summer on the porch. Jesus, you are
Let me pray. God, we are here. We're yours, and we're wanting to lean in. We're attempting to trust this teaching of Jesus, or somehow there's a connection and a blessing in our mourning with our comfort. And God, I pray that we can just step in. Whatever it is that we're mourning, God, I just ask that we be the kind of people who can turn towards it. And if anything, we just see you there weeping with us. And so, Jesus, we bring it all to the table. The frustrations I have, even with the lack of simplicity in the pain and the questions and the loss, but also with an inkling of wanting to trust. God, we just ask for your help. Jesus, we want to trust, lean in, and learn from you how to live like you in this world. And I pray that these teachings continue to shape us and lead us. And praise things in your name. Amen. Everybody, a couple things. One, I think we're going to do dinner on Thursday. We may have a baby. There's a good chance. We are still going to do dinner probably on Thursday. We may not be there. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So there's that. We'll still do Beatitudes next couple weeks. Anything else you need to say? Okay. Anybody else have anything they want to say? Great. Cheers.